Hey there, YouTube. Good morning, folks. I'm going to take a question. I'm going to talk about target focus shooting. It's everybody's favorite. Let's get into it. Hey, Ben, quick question. I transitioned from competing with irons the last couple of years to shooting carry optics this year. It's cool. He gets a dot. Hopefully he gets a Ronin Tactics dot like I have here, but maybe he gets something else. I don't know. Anyway, I've been dry firing the last month with an occluded dot to force being target focused and keeping both eyes open. I'm seeing considerable improvement with my vision. How long should I train with an occluded dot in dry fire? And when do I know if I'm ready to remove the occlusion off my red dot? Thank you. Well, that's actually a very good question, and I see a lot of people in this situation. And I know that it's good to talk about it because there's a lot of guys with this mentality that are like they're willing to practice or put in the time. They're like, occlusion's the way, cool. So if you don't know what that is, that's where we tape over the front or just put a cover on this thing. So if I'm looking at the target, my dominant eye can perceive the sight, and non-dominant eye can still see the target. As you can see, like say one eye can see, one eye can't, my brain kind of puts it together. So that's the point of doing the occlusion. Now there's a few things to talk about here. So first, a lot of people have this view, which I don't think is correct, which is if I train with the occlusion, so I just tape over the front of this thing, I practice, I keep both my eyes open, and this will force me to be target focused. Now, the first thing is that's not really true. The occlusion doesn't force you to do anything. It should just provide an indicator when you're not, which is a different thing, right? It doesn't force me to focus down here. It's just if I have the sight occluded and I stare at the sight itself, now I cannot see the target well, right? And that should clue me in as like, oh, I'm staring at the sight. Now, if you're as raw as this guy is, where it's like, hey, he's like working on keeping both eyes open, he's working on the occlusion, he's dry firing with a dot, he's gonna make a lot of improvement. He's gonna I'm sure he's advancing a lot with the training. But the problem is, how is he gonna assess, like, is he actually, staring at the sight or not? Because the way that it works when you're shooting aggressively, you're gonna change. Like your eye will be flipping back and forth between sight and target, especially as you're kind of developing. And then you'll notice you're like, oh man, I'm like just chasing the dot. Well, that's not good. Or you'll notice you key in on a spot on the target and the sight just sucks right up to where you're looking. But you need to validate that with some practice, and you need to kind of experience doing it right and doing it wrong. So the first thing I'd say is like, I don't think you can assess this super well dry. Like I think you have to go shoot live ammo to really suss out what you're doing. Now, to answer his question, how long should I trade with an occluded dot and dry fire? Is like kind of as long as you want. What I tell people, like a very good end state when it comes to occlusion is like, you don't give a shit if it's on or off. Like it doesn't matter to you. There'll be some times where it's just better to have your sight occluded. Like let's say I'm shooting, like the sun is just right up here and I'm shooting into the sun. Well, if my sight's occluded, the sight won't wash out in the sun. So I will have an advantage being occluded shooting into the sun. Whereas there'll be other times, like to me, if the shooting is really close and fast, I don't like having the occlusion on there. It's like I feel like I like having the most visibility possible. But it's like those are just little circumstantial things. What you want to get to is where you understand what the occlusion's doing for you, and you can kind of assess for yourself, like, hey, am I staring at the sight or am I actually on the target? There's other things you should do, other tools you should alternate. You should turn up the dot brightness, turn down the dot brightness. You should use aiming references. I like little stickers like this big, like put those on targets to give you a spot that's easy to drive your eye to and like make sure the sight's getting sucked onto that spot. It gives you something to focus on. Take those off the targets. Then you just keep playing around with all these conditions until you're like, yeah, I can tell what I'm doing with my eyes. Like I can tell when it's nice to have the occlusion on there so it doesn't wash out in the sun, but it doesn't really matter over here. You'll get to where you can kind of see what's going on with or without the occlusion. That's a very, very good place to go to. All of that having been said, I trained real hard with a sight occluded pretty much exclusively for like 2 years before I really felt I got it. So, this guy's on the right track. It's like doing the occlusion, doing the dry fire, that is good. I'm just saying, like the guys in this demographic, I'll see them put on the occlusion and they think that's going to fix them, and then they practice a lot, and it's real easy to ingrain like bad habits. They might, I've seen guys put an occlusion on and then train, and then they end up being sight focused anyway, but because they were occluded, they've ingrained it. Like they don't even really recognize that they're sight focused anymore. So you don't want to do that. You want to be able to assess, very accurately what exactly your eyes are doing. Anyway, yeah, that's enough for me. This is a pretty good question, actually. Haha.